Welcome to another episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome, everybody, again to another episode of our show, bringing you another really fascinating guest today, helping to create a better tomorrow on some really unique fronts. Today, we have the honor of being joined by Judge Karen Friedman, who is Director of Criminal Justice Innovation, Development, and Engagement at the Bureau of Justice Assistance in the Office of Justice Programs at the United States Department of Justice. And this is a position that she was appointed to by President Biden back in January of 2022. And the Bureau of Justice Assistance actually was created back in 1984, ultimately with this mission to reduce violent crime, create safer communities, and ultimately help reform our nation's criminal justice system. And it ultimately helps American state, local, and tribal jurisdictions to reduce and prevent crime, reduce recidivism, and ultimately promote a fair and safe criminal justice system. Judge Friedman comes to this very important role after serving over 20 years as a member of the Maryland Judiciary sitting in Baltimore. In that capacity, she served on every level of trial court and completed her service on the Baltimore City Circuit Court, the highest trial court in the state. She headed Baltimore's Drug Treatment Court as well and sat on the Judiciary's Equal Justice Commission Sentencing Subcommittee. Judge Friedman is known in Baltimore for her expertise at the intersection of criminal justice with behavioral health, as well as for her innovative approach to sentencing and probation. And she ultimately is using her extensive wealth of knowledge gained on the bench in Baltimore to help improve the lives of those affected by the criminal justice system through this new role. Judge Friedman earned her undergraduate degree in political science from University of Maryland, her law degree from University of Maryland School of Law. And when she's not doing all that, she's also a very accomplished podcast host herself. You can listen to her on the Justice Today podcast, which is the official podcast of the Office of Justice Programs at the Department of Justice. We're honored to have her with us today. Judge Karen Friedman, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's interesting to be on this side for a change.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to this topic because it's something we really haven't gotten our feet too wet in on past shows. But I would love to really start things off with you. I mean, I was listening to actually it was an interview that you were in, I think back in 2018 or so, and in that particular show, you were talking about how at the advanced age of 3, you decided you wanted to be a lawyer. Talk a little bit about your background, Karen, if you would, a little bit about where you grew up, what got you interested in law, and obviously a little bit of your early days in the judiciary. I think that'd be great to start things off.
So I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. Proud Brooklynite. Yay! I live in Baltimore. It's like you can take the girl out of New York, but you can't take New York out of the girl. And I am very proud to live in Baltimore too, but I can't forget my New York roots. And I don't know what it was. I had no one in my family who were lawyers. Neither of my parents were lawyers, and I really didn't have any relatives who were lawyers. I think there were a couple of TV shows that got me very excited about law. Everyone always says LA Law, which is, was the show back in my day. But there actually was a show before that on PBS of all places, and it was with Sir John Gielgud.
Okay.
And it was called Paper Chase.
Okay.
And he played a law professor in a law school. And I don't know why at that young age, but it just it just excited me. And the back and forth and even the Socratic method that he showed just really excited me. And I always loved to debate and to argue, and it just seemed like a natural fit for me. So I basically decided at a very young age that that's what I was going to do. If you look back, like in my elementary school yearbook, it already talks about that. So it pretty much was a fait accompli. But actually now I have a sister. My parents had a later in life child. She's about 23 years younger than me. She's more, probably 25 years younger than me, a lot younger than me. And she just graduated law school. So I grew up with two brothers, and then later in life I got a sister. The two boys ended up being rabbis, and the two girls ended up being lawyers. So I'm not quite sure what that says, or maybe we all like to talk, just in different ways. But yes, not exactly, I think, how my parents had planned this, but the best laid plans of mice and men. So, but I think they're proud of all their children. So being a judge was actually not something I planned at all. It honestly wasn't even in my thought process. I went to law school. I was actually very fortunate. I was able to do like an early admission situation where my first year of law school was my last year of college. So I got to save a year, which was really cool. And in the middle of law school, I had my first set of twins. Less cool, but challenging. And I say first set of twins because I actually have two sets of twins. That's a whole nother show. So I have four children. I went through the law school process really thinking I was going to kind of have a traditional law school lawyer career. Really never thought about the judge track at all. And what happened was, a few years after I graduated, there's something in Maryland called the Orphans Court. It's pretty unique to Maryland. Other states will call it the probate court or surrogacy court, which is basically a court of special jurisdiction that deals with probate, estates, and wills. And the gentleman who was in the seat passed away during his term. It's a 4-year elected term. And when that happens, the governor gets to fill that seat. And I was 29 years old at the time. And the governor knew me, and a lot of people I happened to live in the exact jurisdiction that this judge was from. And so I was approached to see if I would be interested in filling out his 1.5-year term. I had never done any estates and wills. I had taken the course in law school, but that was probably about the extent of it. So I said, well, let me look into this. And I went in and I met with the judges that were there. And I was like, I think I can do this. This is interesting. So I was sworn in for that. I finished out his 1.5 years that he had left. And then I ran for my own 4-year term, and I won that. And then it kind of just snowballed from there. Sometimes the thing that ends up being the best for you is not necessarily the thing you had planned. So I really fell into what has turned out to be an amazing career for myself in a very, out of a tragedy. And the governor making what I hope he still believes to be a good choice, and really just fell into a wonderful career that I think suited my personality very well, and it's been wonderful. I've been very blessed.
Excellent, outstanding. That's a great intro. And thinking about before we get into what we're going to be talking about in terms of BJA and your sort of very diverse initiatives there, when you think back about those 20 some odd years on the bench, and innovation, which obviously is a major topic on your show, ours as well, whether we're talking about healthcare or energy, what have you. Thinking about your time on the bench, what did innovation or the hopes for innovation sort of mean to you as a sitting judge? Obviously, you have these long days on the bench, you have 12, 14 hours, you got a certain amount of cases, you got these jury selection issues, you have the the bailiff that didn't show up, the computer system that's down. I'm sure a wide range of things. And you come home at night and say, "Oh my God, we need to change things. We need innovation." Talk a little bit about what innovation meant, what you thought about in terms of innovation during those couple decades on the bench.
Well, I think that for me, it was a lot more than just the fact that we weren't computerized yet and that we still had paper files. And actually, I find paper files comforting. So that didn't, as you saw when we tried to set up this podcast, technology is not my greatest strength. So those were not, and you know, the sheriff not showing up also at that point wasn't my problem. That's the administrative judge. Let her take care of that problem. But the issues of the same old that really impacted me was seeing individuals who come in front of me every single day, and I'm handed their record, and the record dates back to the 80s. And it's a page as long as my arm, list of convictions. Most of them, even just looking at the paper, is obviously a result of a drug addiction, of a mental health issue, of a lack of opportunity, a lack of a job, a lack of a stable housing. All these underlying issues that have caused the record to look like that. And we just keep dealing with it the same way, right? It's, okay, are you taking a plea today? Or are you going to trial today? What are we doing with this guy? And just, everyone praying for the plea so we can get this case out, just to send him back to the street or send him to jail for a small period of time, for him just to come out again and be dealing with the same issues. And at some point, we have to stop the madness, right? At some point, we have to say, we've been doing things like this in this way for years and years and years, and nothing is changing. We're not safer. We're not lowering our costs of the criminal justice system. We're not accomplishing anything. So when are we going to start really stopping and say, what are we doing? Right. And how can we do this better? How can we do this to make some changes? And, I would talk to these individuals and listen to their stories and listen to their needs and say to them, well, you've been here since the 80s. Has anyone ever said to you, what's up with you? Tell me about you. And most of them said no, that no one has stopped to really, sit in place and say, tell me about you and tell me how I can get you off of this merry-go-round. How can I get you out of this revolving door of the criminal justice system? And when you really start to look at it on a case-by-case basis, there are very, very few people who I've met who are just innately bad people. Very, very few of them, okay? And most of them have faced challenges in their lives that you and I could not even possibly begin to imagine. Or they live in neighborhoods where their opportunities are so few and far between. Again, you and I could not even begin to imagine. So, it's so important to say, okay, so, I would stop and say, what's brought you here in front of me today, right? And they'll look at me and go, well, I was arrested. I go, that's not what I'm talking about. I know you were arrested. I know what we're here for. What has brought you in front? What are the circumstances of your life that have brought you in front of me today? And how can I help you to change that, to fix that, to improve that? So, and most of them are very taken aback when you express an interest or you really show that you are going to invest yourself in them. And I don't care what anyone says, it works. It works. I couldn't unfortunately take data. I didn't have a data scientist sitting in my courtroom with me. And I love data. Data is important. And, my new role at BJA has really taught me how important data is. I didn't have that, but I had that human being in front of me. And I was able to see the transformation and the change when he truly understood that there was someone who cared, who was going to make the investment and was going to refer him to community resources that are really were able to make that change. So, you know, we had specialty courts, we had mental health court, we have drug court, and I was a drug court judge for many years, both on the misdemeanor and felony level. But drug court is not for everybody. Drug court has very specific criteria to get into drug court. There is a lot of data about who drug court works for and who drug court does not work for, and we really follow that data. But in my really strong belief is that every single court can be a problem-solving court. Even if you're not a problem-solving court judge, you can still be solving problems in your courtroom using the same ideology and methods that a problem-solving court uses. What is a problem-solving court, right? Problem-solving court is just, you know, a place that we identify an issue, right? Whether drug, mental health, we're identifying an issue. We are approaching that issue in holistic terms. And there's a judge who's at the center of it, who's really investing themselves, who's becoming a cheerleader and a mother and a judge and a therapist and all the rest of it, wearing all these different hats based on the needs of that individual in front of them, and having a repeated, constant relationship with that person, seeing that person seeing that same judge over and over again, and developing that relationship. And that is such a key part of it. The relationship is such a key part of it, because understanding that a lot of individuals, especially when you're talking about people with a substance use disorder, they have pretty much, you know, cut off, or they've been cut off by every person in their life, right? Because they lied to them, they stole from them, they, you know, families are just sick and tired. And I get that, you know, there were times where I was sick and tired and it wasn't even my son or my brother. So I can only imagine if I would be dealing with it 24/7, right? But so to have someone who is invested in you and shows an interest in you has a tremendous value. And that method, it works. And I try to bring that into my regular courtroom, use those problem-solving skills that I got from being a problem-solving court judge, using the resources that I have built relationships with, and bringing them into my courtroom to use them to help people. You know, I would go out into the community, which I think judges should be doing, going out into their community and seeing which resources, what are the resources that are there. Every community, nearly, I don't want to say every, but nearly every community has, you know, substance abuse disorder resources, mental health resources, vocational training resources, housing resources, all these different things that these communities are missing. Bring those resources into the courtroom, and as individuals appear in front of me and identify what the issues are, pairing them right there and then in the courtroom. So, because realistically, for a lot of these individuals, you know, if you say, make a phone call and they're going to call you back and then it's not going to work. You know what I mean? Some of them have a different phone number every month. If they were able to organize their lives in a way that would work, they most likely wouldn't be in front of me, right? So, you know, try to take some of the chaos out of their life. Try to make things easy. The easier you make it, the more likely they're going to grab onto that help and those resources. So if there's someone in the courtroom, you know, sitting in that jury box that I could say, hey, Mr. Amin is here. he works for, such and such drug program. Let him interview you, let him assess you and see if they can meet your needs, and put them into the jury room and have that meeting right then and there. And they could set up that relationship right then and there. It has a tremendous value. And then, I follow up on it. So I would see these individuals once a month or once every other month, depending on the need, and follow up and say, hey, how's this program going? I know last time you were here, you met with Mr. Amin and blah, blah, how's that relationship going? And I'll hear either, hey, it's great, or I really don't like it, and not every program is for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So if program A doesn't work, there's program B and there's program C. As long as there are legitimate reasons why that relationship is not working, I don't mind. But we'll try the next one, right?
Yep.
These are very intimate relationships that really have to work. But it's that investment, and it's really creating a relationship. It's remembering when they came in front of you that that they're having a baby in a month, and then when they come back in front of you, remembering to say, hey, did you have the baby? What did you have? And let me see a picture. And things like that. Or, oh, your son's, in a baseball game tonight. Remember, oh, last time you were here, your son was going to be playing baseball. Like, how'd that game go? How's the season going? Creating a relationship where they know that you are invested in them, and they become invested in doing right for you. They don't want to disappoint you. And they, to me, the best thing that someone who's on probation to me can say is that, oh, Judge, you're going to be so disappointed. And the reason why is because that means they know I care, right? You cannot disappoint someone who doesn't give two hoots about it, right? You can only disappoint people that you care about. And so the fact that they know that I'm going to be disappointed also tells me that they know that I care. And that's great, because then that's a relationship that I can work on and build on. So that's kind of the way I would approach my docket. I cannot say it was always, I can't say everyone would agree with the way I handle my docket. I would say that it's very time consuming. And in the court system, we tend to look at numbers, and we have a certain amount of cases that have to be moved. We got to move the cases. How many cases did you move? How many felonies did we get out this month? How many misdemeanors did we get out this month? There's a real focus on numbers and moving dockets, and I understand that. We have to move the docket. We have to get these cases out, and no doubt about it, they have to get taken care of. But I think we also have to look at how well we're moving the docket. And the focus can't always be on how fast we're moving the docket, but we have to look at how well we're moving the docket, and how justly, what have we accomplished? And I think that we also have to really look at it proactively and say, well, if we move the docket maybe a little slower to do the kind of things that Judge Friedman's trying to do, then maybe down the road we'll have less cases, because these individuals that she's working with are not going to be back in the system. And I can't say all of them won't be back. Of course, some of them will be back, but some of them won't. I get that that's not really what judges are paid to do. I get that that's not what we're trained to do. I understand. I don't have a social work degree. I have a law degree. I get all that. And at the end of the day, I agree that the criminal justice system was not designed to do what I'm doing, right? But it was also not designed to handle all the public health crises that we're not dealing with anywhere else. No one else is dealing with it. No one else is dealing with the addiction and the crime that results from it. No one else is dealing with the mental health crisis in this country. The criminal justice system has become the repository for all the ills of society that no one else is dealing with. So then we're just one more system that's saying that it's not our problem. And who wants to be that one more system that says that's not our problem?
Right.
Especially when the individual is standing right in front of you. You can easily help him from where you're sitting. You have access to things that he will never have access to. Plus, I had such a unique hammer, right? So not only did I have the desire to help, I had a hammer that forced him to accept help, right? So, it's almost like, how dare I not use my position and not use the opportunity to try to make some kind of positive impact in this individual. Because again, this individual is also a son, and he's also most likely a father, and he's a community member, and he can be a taxpayer, and so on and so on and so on. So when you help one individual, it's so exponential, because you're now adding a man back into a family, or a woman. I've had many women that I've worked with as well. And women are actually much tougher to work with. And that's a whole nother topic. How dare I not, just say, again, not my problem. It's not.
Right.
So, I think that people are put in places for specific reasons. And, I think that's why I found my way to the bench. And I think that I hope that some of my colleagues, I know some of them have started doing some of the things that I implemented, and I hope they will continue. And any judges that are listening and would like more information about how to do these kind of things in their own courtroom, I'm always happy to talk about it and share my experiences. So
excellent. Excellent. No, it's clear why you've been picked in essence for this new role, and clearly with these new tools, the ability to amplify this principle, as you were saying, of problem-solving courts, is within your hands in terms of the ability to make investments, to do the outreach, the education, and so forth. Could you just say a few words about, I said in the intro that, BJA has been around since the 80s, but this is a fairly new role in terms of criminal justice innovation, development, and engagement that you have taken on here. Can you just talk a little bit about the organization itself and, what happened in 2020? Did Joe Biden just call you up and like, hey, Karen, we need you in January. Get over to the Justice Department. How did that work? Tell a couple comments about that.
All right. So as you said, BJA has been around for a long time. Basically, it is the money arm, I would say, of the Department of Justice. Anytime Congress passes legislation regarding criminal justice reform that has money to states or organizations attached to it, that money goes through BJA. BJA is in charge of distributing that money to either we have both formula grants, which are grants that are very specific in nature, where Congress says you must give it to X, Y, and Z. And then there are grants that are more discretionary and competitive, where we're allowed to it's like I said, it's competitive. So people apply for it, and BJA and their team chooses who wins it. We have peer reviewers. Peer reviewers are people who have been in the field, who review these applications and these grants and help us decide which application is worthy of the grant. So, for example, if it's a grant asking for money for a program in a prison, we have retired wardens who would be reading these applications. People who have done work in the field, who really know, who know the field, who would best be able to judge which applications are worthy of winning the grant. And we have a huge team of people at BJA, wonderful, wonderful people. Our director is Carlton Moore. He came in a little bit after me. He came in March, and he was an SAA, which is he was the head of the state administering agency in Ohio. The state administering agency basically is the part of the state government that would receive funds from BJA and other federal agencies and would distribute it throughout the state. Every state has an SAA. So he was the SAA in Ohio for over 17 years. So he has a lot of experience in grant requesting and grant writing and the state needs in policing and all different areas related to the criminal justice system. And it's really been a wonderful place to work, I have to say. Everyone is very collegial and really just focused on making the criminal justice system better. And it's been very refreshing for me to be around people, like-minded people every day who are really working to make that better. So as far as my position, my role is, it's a brand new role. It basically was created for me. It was not Biden who reached out, but there were people in the Maryland legislative delegation who knew about the work that I was doing in Baltimore. Cool. I'm pretty well known around here. Yep. And they knew what I was trying to do. They knew some of my frustrations, and they knew that I was really trying to make some bigger, broader changes to the system in general. I think they appreciated the way I dealt with individuals, and they saw how passionate I was and how much I really cared about these issues, and thought that I could bring that experience to the Biden administration. And they made the suggestion, and different things were kicked around, but this is where I landed. And it's been very rewarding. I have really been able to look at the system from like a 30,000-foot view. I have been traveling all around the country. And what's great about BJA is that we really look at the system from a soup to nuts perspective. Yep. So it's everything from prevention and community violence interruption all the way through reentry. Obviously I'm passionate about courts, but really also reentry is really something that I'm really passionate about. A lot of the work that I just explained is actually reentry work, right? It's when people are on probation, which means they're, especially in Maryland and some other states, we have what's known as split sentences. So what we can do is I could say, okay, you're going to jail, your crime is worth 5 years, let's say, okay, based on the statute, but I'm only sending you to jail for 1 year. Then when you come out, you're going to be on probation, but you're backing up the 4 years. So basically you owe the system 4 years, but I'm not going to make you do the whole 5. Instead, I'm going to put you on probation. And if you do your probation well, we're going to forget about the 4 years. Right? So a lot of the people who were on probation to me, that was their status. They were on this probation. They had already served some time in prison. They owed the system. I hate to use that word, but that's how it's used. They owed the judge, or they owed the system the backup time. But my thought is that if I really craft the probation in a way that would address the underlying needs that brought him into the system to start with, then we could have a successful probation. We don't have to worry about the backup time. I don't have to throw him back in jail, which was, to me, not accomplishing anything. Right. And really try to re-enter and reintegrate him into the community in a productive, successful way. The reentry work is really interests me, and I feel like it's really one part of the system that we know what works. Right. and we don't have to it's not rocket science, right? It really truly is not rocket science. It's about will and investment. That's really what it is. It's about the states having the will to improve their reentry system, meaning we know, every state knows every day who's getting out of their prisons and their jails, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not a big mystery.
Right.
They know when release dates are, right? So if we properly prepare people for their release date by making sure they have their state ID, they have their health insurance, they have a place to live, which I wasn't even aware before I went to BJA, what a crisis point we're at with that. You know, I used to always think jobs, jobs, jobs. Like that was my main thing. Calling every person I knew, do you have a job? Do you have a job? Do you have a job?
Yeah.
Right? I didn't even realize how fundamental the housing issue was to success and how difficult it was to get that proper housing. So, you know, looking at innovations in housing has really been something that I've been really focused on, because without that, you know, the rest of it is lost. You're not going to have a successful reentry, and you're not going to have a successful probation if every night you're, you know, couch surfing, and you can't you know, you don't have a stable place to live.
Right.
You'll never be able to hold down a job, and all the rest of it is gone if you don't have a stable place to live. So, you know, we know what these individuals need when they come out of jail, but we need to realize that, you know, the first day of entering jail is your first day of reentry. Everything that happens in that time frame is going to be key to deciding into really being. It's really going to determine whether you're going to be able to have a successful reentry and to what level of success you're going to have. Okay, so if we don't treat day one of entry, right, as your first step towards reentry, you're not going to gain the skills you need between point A and point Z.
Right.
So meaning, in the jails, in the prisons, we need to have education. We need to have substance abuse programs, substance misuse programs. The language is always changing. I try to stay up on the politically correct, but I think everybody knows where my heart is. So if I use the wrong word, please forgive me. The mental health programs that are needed, the vocational training that's needed, the educational programs that are needed. There are some states that are really doing an awesome job. There really are. And then there are some states that are failing tremendously. And again, it's not rocket science, right? We know what needs to be done. It just, you know, you need to have a governor that really wants to see this done, that he or she gets this trajectory of, you know, entry into jail and then reentry, and has the programming and the funding that is needed to support the correctional officers and the programming in the facilities, and really, you know, addressing the needs of the residents of those facilities. And, you know, I could take, for example, a state like Maine. I think everyone in my life is like nauseous from me talking about Maine, because all I do is talk about Maine. But Maine is doing such amazing things. I literally came back there. I was just like in the best mood ever. My kids are like, what? I was like, Maine is doing so amazing. I'm like, they're like, you are so weird, Mom. But I mean, it's like, you know, I am the only mother who sends their kids texts. I'm going to jail now. I won't have my phone. Talk to you later. They're like, why is our mother sending us texts like that? That's just weird. Yeah, you know, Maine has really invested in their prison system. And they are doing incredible things. From, you know, when we talk about soup to nuts, literally soup to nuts. They have taken out the fryers from their kitchens. And it's all baked now. Everything is baked. They're actually thinking about nutrition.
Yep.
And teaching the residents about nutrition, right? Which in some communities, especially talking about Baltimore, there are neighborhoods in Baltimore that are food deserts. I mean, I've seen it where you can't get an apple, okay? You can't get a banana. That's not, what's being sold at the corner store. And there's no, real places to buy food unless you're, traveling miles. So teaching them about nutrition. They have greenhouses there where they're growing their own vegetables. They have certified 70 master gardeners. So when they're released from the facility, they can actually have a job as a master gardener. I mean, how amazing is that, right?
Yeah.
They, even the maximum facility prison there looks like a college campus. Everyone's walking around with a laptop. Everyone's in school. If they're not someone who's really good with their hands, and there are programs for those guys, I'll talk about that in a minute, but they are all in school. I met guys in college. I met guys in graduate school. There's one young man who I met who is being released in June. He's already gotten his master's degree, and he's getting out in June and starting law school in September. I have a couple, we have at BJA, a couple of wonderful people who work for us now who are returning, lived experience, who have been in the exact same situation as this individual and who have gone to law school. And I was able to hook them up, and now they're able to email each other and be a support to this individual. There is a debate team. The debate team at the main DOC debated the students at MIT. Yes, that MIT. And with 5 independently paid judges, the DOC won the debate. Google it. It's amazing. Okay. And this young man that I'm talking about was the head of the debate team. And the pride that they felt, I met the whole team, as they should, right? It was just remarkable. And when I walked through the facilities with the commissioner, and his name is, I kid you not, his name is Commissioner Liberty. Greatest name ever, greatest movie name ever, but this is his actual government name. He is the head of prisons, and his name is Commissioner Liberty. And he is the greatest guy. I was so impressed with him. He knew everyone we passed, he knew. He knew them by name. The guys knew him. They were able to approach him. He was approachable. He really cared. It was just obvious that he cared about his residents, and that's what they're called, residents, and he cared about his officers. And, what that does is it creates a very different environment, not just for the residents, but for the officers as well. We have a crisis in this country, and that is, something that BJA deals with as well. We have a law enforcement crisis in this country. We have a hiring and retention crisis. And when I say crisis, I mean crisis. I mean that very soon we are not going to be able to have the amount of officers in correctional facilities that are needed, okay? But when you create an environment like he has created there, and you see yourself as having a purpose, you're no longer a guard. Now you are like a rehabilitation specialist, where you're actually helping people. I think in 2018, when the new governor had come in there, they had over 144 uses of mace, or whatever they used. It's called, I'm not such a expert on this, but whatever they use to calm people down, when there's an issue, and whatever they spray, I don't know if it's whatever it is they spray. They had 144 incidents where they had to use that. In 2021, they were down to 4. They went from 144 to 4. Why do you think, why do we think that is, right? Why do we? Because the whole system has changed.
Yep.
And the way that it's approached has changed. And the way, they know how good they have it there now. And those residents don't want to mess up their privileges. And so when someone new comes in, they become the guards, right? The residents become the guards. They're like, you better behave because we have it good here. And we know we have it good here. So you're not going to come in now and mess up everything that we have here. I mean, they have a wood shop the size of a football field where they have over 100,000 instruments, including chainsaws, okay, and instruments that can kill people, okay? Right. They have not had an incident of someone using it on another resident or someone trying to smuggle it out. They haven't had that problem. They are making magnificent things there that I've seen that they sell at stores all across Maine. Now, there are a few points to be made. One, I understand that Maine has the lowest per capita incarceration rate in the country. Okay, so I understand that. I also understand that their population is different. Maybe about 86% of their incarcerated population is white. So their dynamics are a little bit different than some places. I get that. So it's not going to be apples to apples, right? But what it does show you is that it's possible, right? That it's possible to do this a different way. Right. It shows you that will and investment does pay off. Right. It does show you that. So yes, obviously a bigger population, it's going to have to be, you're going to have to tweak it differently. Different ethnicities and races, they're going to respond to different things. They're going to respond perhaps to different vocational training. Perhaps gardening is not the way to go. You know what I mean? They're going to react to different and respond to different ways of doing things. But we could make it racially and ethnically sensitive and targeted, right? Again, it's will and investment. Right. And then, to the people who are going to listen to this and say, these are criminals, right? They've done bad things. Why should we be calling them? Why do they deserve to have a laptop? My son doesn't have a laptop. Or why do they deserve to have a college education? I can't afford to give my children a college education. I hear the argument. I understand the feeling, okay? I get it. But what people have to remember is that 90, I don't know the exact number, but I'm going to even go with 97%, okay? And someone wants to show me otherwise, I'm happy to look. But I'm going to say 97% of people in prisons today are getting out at some point. There are very, very few people who are in prison for life, okay? Yeah. Or even for 30 years, right? Mm-hmm. Most people are serving 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. At some point in the fairly near future, right, they are getting out. Yeah. And if we don't do anything with them when they're inside, they're coming out the exact same way, probably worse, mm-hmm, okay, because of the psychological trauma that goes on inside, because of all the professional criminals they've met inside, et cetera, right? And we're putting them back in your community, right? The guy who left Baltimore, he's coming back to Baltimore. Where the hell else is he going, right? He's coming back to the place he knows. He's coming back to where mom is, right? Grandma, kids, whatever it is, right? So if we don't do these things when the individual is inside, he is coming out in the same position or worse, back onto your streets, and it's just going to be a public safety threat again. Right. But you know what? Someone that comes out now with a college degree and he could actually get a job that he could support his family on, is he recidivating? Is he going back? I don't think so. not at the same percentages,
Right.
much lower percentages. I'm not saying none of them are going back, but when they really are coming out with now a marketable career, right? A welding degree, whatever it is, that, they most likely will be employed. And once you're employed and you're doing well, or if he's coming out on his medication, right? He's coming out on his mental health meds, or he's coming out on his medically assisted treatment, his Suboxone, his methadone, whatever it is that has gotten his issues under control, the chances of him recidivating and being back in front of a judge and being a nuisance again to the community, it's much lower. So, my philosophy is there are a lot of arguments to be made to support this work. There are some of us who feel it from here, right? Mm-hmm. It's a hard thing. It's but for the grace of God go I, and had I been born in a different zip code to different parents, who knows what my life would have looked like, right? And there are some of us that feel very strongly that way and motivate us that way. Then there are those of us who you need to be able to make a logic argument. And the argument I just made is the logic argument, is he is coming back to your neighborhood. What can we do in the interim to make sure he is no longer a public safety threat? Right. Yep. And then, you know what? For some people, it's the pocketbook that resonates, right? It's the taxes. So I could tell you it is very expensive to keep someone in prison for a year. Every year you keep them in. I mean, every state's different. It could be $70,000 and upwards, right? To put someone into a really good substance abuse program, to finally deal with the addiction and to get him, into a good place is less than half of that, right? So even if you don't think about it from here and you don't get it here, your pocketbook should get it. Right. And, so there are a lot of ways to approach this issue. And, I think it's those of us who are really passionate about this stuff really need to learn to make all the arguments, because it's going to take all different types of people to solve the problems.
Absolutely.
I've been talking too much, I think.
No. It's great. No, you've been you've been laying the landscape for how how broad the purview is for what BJA and this new role is all about. We've talked courts, you've talked innovation and corrections, which is fascinating and sort of mirrors some of the guests we've had on previous shows, and in terms of what we learned in the Smart Prison project over in Finland and some other interesting models internationally. Let's talk for a couple of minutes, if we would, about something else that you're mentioned in the intro that you're very passionate about, and you've talked a little bit about it in terms of the mental health, substance abuse, incarceration connection. And I was looking, and we'll put the link to the website and the various projects in the bio to the show, but you have things like the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program, JMHCP, also within the, I guess this falls both under mental health and corrections, but this the guidelines for managing substance abuse within jails, and going back to your issue about entry and reentry sort of starting on the same date. And this one was really fascinating because you bring together a consortium, let's say, the National Institutes of Corrections, Advocates for Human Potential, American Society for Addiction Medicine, National Commission for Correctional Healthcare. I mean, you're really bringing a lot of minds together on how to get this done. This isn't just here's a couple bucks and figure this out. This is really comprehensive. Talk a little bit about this aspect of it, because obviously the mental health and substance abuse prevention are important, but how you ultimately craft some of these relationships and the types of investments you're making are substantial.
Right. Yeah, I have to say the first month or 6 weeks I was at the job, all I did was learn acronyms. It's like every single national organization has an acronym, and I would sit in these conversations and all these government people were using these acronyms, and literally I felt like I was sitting in like middle of in China in some meeting room, because that's literally what I was. It was Chinese to me, and I promised myself I wouldn't become one of those people. But the longer you're here, the harder it is to remember that people don't use the same language that we do, and you have to always break everything down. So yes, we work with we have a lot of partnerships and a lot of we work with a lot of national organizations that are doing a lot of good work. Now, as I said, a lot of the programming and the funding comes directly from Congress. So,
Yep.
like the money for second chance, all of it, all of the money comes from Congress, right? It's a lot of organizations who, BJA, we don't lobby. That's not, we're not a lobby organization. We kind of follow suit with what Congress is doing and what Congress has allocated. But there are a lot of those organizations that you mentioned that are on the ground. You mentioned, and all the correctional organizations. There's the ACA and the CLA, Corrections Leaders Association, and the Association of the American Correctional Association. I don't have to remember what all their acronyms are for. And then there's all the sheriffs, the NSA, the National Sheriffs Association. Most jails in this country are controlled by sheriffs. So there are, there's, for those people who don't know the distinction from your listeners, prisons are generally long-term facilities. Usually there, and there are exceptions to everything I'm going to say. There are exceptions, but they're usually the long-term incarceration. Usually they're controlled by the state, and they're normally post-trial. You're there post-trial. Jails, most of the time, are pre-trial. Or you've been sentenced to a very short sentence, usually under a year. You normally will stay in a jail. And many of those jails around the country are controlled by sheriffs, as opposed to DOC, Department of Corrections, correctional type of officers. They're controlled by the Sheriff's Department. That's how it happens in Baltimore. I actually just came back from meeting with the sheriff in Charlotte. Sheriff McFadden, he controls the Charlotte jails, and actually he's doing a lot of great innovative things that I'm just in awe to see what he's doing in the jails there. So they do more of the lobby, right? They're the ones, those organizations are the ones really on the Hill trying to relay the needs that are out there. Once the money is allocated, the solicitations are crafted by the teams at BJA. We have a whole policy department that crafts the solicitations, and as I said, then we have a whole team that works on granting the awards and distributing the funds. But we have relationships with all the groups. They are very vocal with us about what their needs are, what they're facing in the field, and whatever funds that we are allocated, we try to address those needs. We do have some discretionary funding that we can use. We do have some field innovation initiative money that we can use, that we could award to good grant proposals. But we are definitely very aware of needs in the field. So, for example, we know that right now there are a dearth of female police officers in this country. And a lot of people feel that policing would look very different if there would be more female officers. So there was a program out of New York, if I'm not mistaken, called 30 by 30, where we're working with them to help have 30% of the police force female by the year 2030. And those are, the types of projects that we help support, and we help have national summits on these issues. We just had a national summit in Tulsa. We have another conference coming up in February, specifically targeting CVI, community violence intervention.
Yep.
That's become a real issue of passion within BJA and OJP, and a special focus of Amy Solomon, the Assistant Attorney General. We have now hired for the first time at OJP a full-time person who is formerly incarcerated and has lived experience.
Yep.
And was really, his name is Eddie Bocanegra, and he's from Chicago. He's phenomenal. And he, when he got out, he was really instrumental in trying to do CVI work on the ground in Chicago. And then we were really lucky to get him to join OJP and work on these issues. So, we have a new initiative called Justice. We have a knowledge lab, which is a place. It's going to be a central place where all law enforcement statistics are going to be joined. So there's going to be one place, like one repository for information, because we really need data and information in these fields to know what things look like and what needs to be funded, etc.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of great stuff going on. And it's unfortunate that people really don't know very much about BJA. I encourage everyone to go on our website and learn a little bit more. I've been trying in my podcast to educate a little bit about what we're trying to do. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, perfectly. And yes, we would have helped you spread that word. I just wanted one other place, if possible. I know I'm taking a lot of your time here, but a little bit afield from corrections. I noticed in the extensive dossier that you have there, the hate crimes section of it focuses on working within the Stop School Violence Act and sort of this relationship with you and the Office of Community Oriented Policing Services. I mean, it's just a horrible era in terms of what's going on in terms of violence in the school system. But say a few words about sort of your focus here as well. I think this is an important piece of, we might not think about it in terms of the justice. Well, it's always part of the justice system, but this I thought is kind of sort of stood out. And if you could say a couple words, that'd be great.
So honestly, that's not my expertise at all, and it's not in my portfolio at all. Again, it's something that again, Congress has, Congress adds a lot of things, and they say it should come through us. It's always nice at every congressional budget to see new things that we do. We have PREA, which is the Prison Rape Elimination Act.
Yep.
That's something that BJA has to, has monitoring over. We monitor DICRA, which is death in custody reporting, which is, anytime there's a death in custody, whether jail or prison, it comes through our reporting system. We have something called PSOB, which is basically almost like it's a death benefits program for police officers and law enforcement. That's run through BJA. Like, people would be amazed how many programs run out of BJA offices that you wouldn't expect. But we're very busy.
Yeah, I can imagine. Gary, one thing while I have you, because sort of coming back to you now, one other thing I wanted to highlight, because I sat in a couple of months ago. Well, actually, there was a couple of them from the Clinton Foundation's Interfaith Initiative on the opioid crisis. You founded an organization focused on interfaith initiatives for domestic violence. Could you just say a few words about that as well? I think that's an important part of your story.
I would love to. So before I got on the bench, I was very active with a domestic violence organization here in Baltimore. It was a Jewish domestic violence organization.
Yep.
It's called Chana. And one of the programs that we had was Shabbos Chana, Sabbath Chana, where on a certain Sabbath of the year, we would ask all the rabbis from every denomination to talk about domestic violence from his or her pulpit. And we thought this would be a great way to unify the community against domestic violence. And, especially, in the Jewish community, we do have domestic violence, thankfully not at the same rate of the general population, but we do have a too high a rate. And statistically, Jewish women are 7 times, they go back to their situation 7 times more than a woman in the general community. And there are religious reasons for that and cultural reasons for that. I won't get into all that. But when I got on the bench, I had to resign from that position because, it was a conflict, because then I would be, at that point, I was sitting on domestic violence cases. So, but I was still very passionate about the issue, especially now actually listening to these cases day in and day out, doing protective orders day in and day out. It's a huge problem in Baltimore. There's currently one entire building of judges that all they do all day are protective orders. It's insane. So so I thought about what we had done in the Jewish community, and I said, hey, why wouldn't this be something that would work in the general community? I approached the governor, who at that time, well, actually, at first I approached the mayor for Baltimore City, which at that time was Mayor Stephanie Rollins Blake, who happened to be my girlfriend and went to law school with me. So I will caveat that. So she really couldn't say no to me. And I'm like, we need to do this, and the idea was, again, to start an interfaith coalition against domestic violence, where, again, we would have at that time it was a citywide conference for faith leaders of all faiths, all denominations, to come together to take a stand against domestic violence and learn about domestic violence, and then have them speak about it from their pulpits, whether it's Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, depending on the religion. Because, to be very upfront and honest, every religion has a statement paper about domestic violence and about being against domestic violence. And every clergy person believes that they're trained in domestic violence, right? But in reality, the education is really not as extensive as I believe that it should be. I think that domestic violence has very specific elements to it and factors to it that are very different than other type of violence. And, I think that clergy in general want to keep families together. I think, that's the tenet of almost every religion, right? Is divorce is bad and keeping the family together is the best way. And, in most circumstances, I would say I would agree with that. However, when there's domestic violence in the home, that is something that is very different. And sometimes, if you send a woman back to that situation, you are really putting her life at risk. And, so it's so important for clergy people to have the right language, that when someone approaches them, and for many women, the first person they do tell their situation to is their clergy person. And those few first words that the clergy person says is going to be really key to what that woman does and whether she seeks protection. What did you do, right? Or what caused him to do that? Or, just go home, make him a nice dinner, it's going to be okay. Things like that. Divorce is forbidden no matter what. Words like that can be very, very damaging. So, our goal was to really teach clergy people the do's and don'ts, right? And, to let them know they're not going to be able to solve the problem on their own. They're not going to be able to therapy their way out of a domestic violence situation. Mediation therapy is not recommended in domestic violence situation. When you have an unequal playing field, you can't really do that type of therapy. Couples counseling doesn't work when there's a power imbalance. And if someone's being beaten, that creates a power imbalance. And just to, give them some tools, because I think for a lot of them that, they want to do the right thing, and they just didn't know what to do. So just to even teach them about referring, right? Refer,
Yep.
my words, refer. Don't deal, there are professionals in the community, and in your religious community. There are, I know there are Muslim organizations, there are Christian organizations, there are Jewish organizations who this is what they specialize in. So if you're faced with this issue, make the proper referrals, and to teach her about safety planning, about a suitcase under the, somewhere hidden at a friend's house with a phone, with a few dollars, with a couple of days change clothes, etc. And those kind of things can be very, very valuable to a woman or a man who's going through that situation. So it was really successful citywide. So then we took it statewide under Governor O'Malley, and then I'm very proud to say that when Governor O'Malley was done with his 8 years, Governor Hogan, who is a Republican, and Governor O'Malley was a Democrat, but that was a program that he kept. So that's been going on for years, and that was one of the saddest things I had to retire from. But I found another judge that was willing to take it over for me, and that was another place where the power of the judge. It's
Yep.
the power I had as a convener, right?
Yep.
When a judge calls and say, "Hey, will you come to this conference and hear about this issue?" People come, and the judiciary was wonderful and allowed me to use the Judicial College to have my conference. So people thought that was really cool. They get to come to the Judicial College, and they would take pictures with the judge and put on their Facebook. I mean, we both know that it's not really a big deal, but to some people it's a really big deal,
Yeah.
And so it goes back to my initial message of, judge as community member. This is your community. I mean, I don't know about everyone, but I had a living, residency requirement. I had to live in Baltimore to be a judge in Baltimore. So I live in this community. I'm raising my kids in this community, right? So I want Baltimore to be the best place it could possibly be for selfishly for myself and my children. And I want my grandchildren to live here. And I have 4 grandchildren, and they don't live here right now, but I'm hoping, I'm still hopeful. I have 1 here. The other 3 are in Florida, but hoping they're coming back. I wanted to be the best for all the citizens. And, I had a unique role and a unique power to make change and to convene and to help, elevate people to a better life. And let's all use the power that we have. Whatever your power is, if you're a businessman and you have the power to hire people who are re-entering, use that power. If you're a pastor and you have the power to protect a woman who's facing domestic violence, and and protect her, meaning to bring the church around her and to surround her and give her the support and love that she needs to get through her situation, use that power. If you're a teacher, use the power you have to educate young minds. Whatever your power is, everyone has a power in their own position. If you're a grocer, don't throw out your extra food. Feed the hungry with your extra food. That stuff that to you at the end of the day may seem like just garbage, and to someone else that's a treasure. So use whatever power you have to make your community stronger and better, more compassionate, more humane. I really believe that people react to being treated humanely. I think humanity breeds humanity. And I just, hope everyone just pays their blessings forward, and that we could slowly start to make this world a little better for our children and grandchildren.
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful message. Clearly, in the hour or so we spent together, we clearly see why you have been chosen for this role. I mean, I take my hat off to you for the amount of programs and all the work that you're doing now, and everything you've been doing. But really, wishing you the best with this as you continue to expand and amplify these messages from this new role at Justice. Again, for everybody that's going to be listening to this particular episode of the show across the podcast networks or watching on the YouTube channel, you've been listening to Judge Karen Friedman, Director of Criminal Justice Innovation, Development, and Engagement, Bureau of Justice Assistance, United States Department of Justice, doing really amazing things to reduce violent crime, grow strong, safe communities, and ultimately help reform the criminal justice system here in the United States. Karen, I want to thank you again for taking the time out of your schedule to come talk to us about some of these topics for a little while. Obviously, thank you for everything you're doing there at BJA. And as we like to say on our show, thanks for helping to create a better tomorrow for so many people that are out there via what you're doing. It's really a very inspiring story.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.